So going with your gut, there are some situations where definitely you want to go with your gut. One is situations that are similar to the savannah environment. So when you have a fight or flight situation, when you have, let's say, a bus barreling down at you, this is not the time to stop there and think, should I go left or should I go right?
Right.
This is the time to react. Just go with your gut, go with your intuition. That's the time the fight or flight response is similar to the savannah environment. So
Yes.
that's kind of one dynamic. Another dynamic is if you know somebody quite well, if they're kind of part of your tribal group, and then you feel something is off with your dynamics, your interactions with this person, then it's a time to kind of be like a little bit suspicious of what's going on and time to evaluate the situation in a more reflective manner. If they're part of your tribe, but your interaction seems different, that might mean that there's hiding something or something is going on. So you want to check into that. So that's kind of a similarity. Again, those are two similarities to the tribal environment. Because in the
Gotcha.
tribal environment, we had to read our tribal members pretty well because that was very important for our ability to survive and thrive in that environment.
Right.
Another dynamic that you want to kind of trust your gut is on expert intuition. Now, what's expert intuition? That's a specific type of intuition that is actually trustworthy. And here is where it's trustworthy. It's trustworthy where you have done a certain limited task many, many, many times. You've probably heard of 10,000 hours of practice. You don't need
Right.
to do 10,000 hours, but you need to have performed this task very often and have gotten quick feedback on whether it's right or wrong. So whether you've done it correctly or not correctly. For example, I mean, all of us have to deal with email a lot, right? So we can
Right.
probably take a very quick glance at our email and see whether something is spam or not, right? And you'll be right like 98% of the time. And
Right.
so that's because you have learned to associate certain characteristics of spam with the email and so on, and you tend to be better at it than the computer filter, no matter how genius the algorithms are. And so you have learned that over time of your engagement with email because you're getting quick feedback fast on this sort of activity. And so those are the kinds of things where you've gotten a lot of expertise. And so those are the things that you can trust your quick responses on in sort of business settings. So though
Okay.
that's where you can trust your gut. But again, that's kind of limited to narrow situations where you have a lot of experience. So let's say if you are in a P&L role as profit and loss, you've probably taken a lot of looks at profit and loss statements, and you can trust a brief glance at a P&L document that will tell you what's going on in that scenario, in that business unit. And that's
Right.
something that you can trust. But if you haven't, then you don't really, you should not really trust your gut.
I gotcha. So let's talk about the framework that you've created, the 8-step decision making model. I think that is fascinating, and I love it.
Excellent. So let's talk about the 8-step decision making model. What you need to do in order to make a good decision. And this is a process that you need to make a good decision, solid decision on something major where you really don't want to screw up. So this is, you're making a major bid for something, you're hiring for a key role, you're deciding to move your office or something like that. So something quite important where you want to take
Okay.
sufficient time to make sure that you make the best decision possible. So the 8-step decision making is first you want to identify the need for a decision to be made. So the first of 8 steps, we often don't identify the need to make a decision in a timely enough manner. For example, we're just talking about Facebook, where they really should have identified the need to reveal some of this information earlier, or with
Right.
companies that needed to move on the Delta surge quite a bit earlier than they did. Then you want to gather relevant information from a variety of perspectives. Look for people who disagree with you. Look for people who have the opposite personality. If you're an optimist, look for pessimists. If you're a pessimist, look for optimists, and so on. So look for people with diverse perspectives who disagree with you. You don't need to go with what they say, but consider their perspectives heavily because they might see out where you have certain blind spots. Next, that's the second step. Next, the third steps. Decide on your goal and paint a clear vision of the outcome that you want to achieve. So you want that ideal outcome. What would your best outcome be? So write that out, draw it out. So have a clear vision of what you want to accomplish. Then develop clear decision making criteria to evaluate options. So you don't select the options first. This is critical. You want to select the criteria you'll use to select the options. That's the next step. And because otherwise your options will weigh you too much and you'll go for an option that's not the best. Then you generate viable options. So after you created criteria. So that's the step 5. You generate viable options for whatever you will choose. Then you want to weigh the options, picking the best of the bunch. So when you're weighing the options, you're looking at criteria, which you generated earlier, rating each option based on each criteria, and then adding the sum of the criteria and the option and evaluating the total numerical value of each option. So that's step 6. Then you want to implement the option that you chose, and that's the obvious thing. But you want to make sure that when you evaluate it, you think about ways that it can go wrong, that it can fail, and try to address those ways in advance. Finally, evaluate the implementation process. You don't want to simply implement it, but you want to decide what will tell you that you're going in the right direction, what will tell you that you're going in the wrong direction, and that you need to revise it. And then you want to make sure that you measure the implementation of the decision. So that's the 8-step model. And it's really highly effective. I've implemented this with a lot of clients, and they have found that this is a great, great improvement to their business processes.